My wife kept watching me from places she shouldn't be. The first time I caught my wife watching me from around a corner, I laughed. That is the part I keep returning to. Not the blood, not the police, not the photograph she sent me afterward. I keep thinking about that first morning and how easily I dismissed it. How close I came to the wall. How only one of Lynn's eyes was visible, along with a narrow strip of her cheek and a strand of dark hair pressed against the paint. I had been carrying coffee toward the front door, already late for work. When I noticed her, my hand jerked and hot coffee splashed over my fingers. Jesus, Lynn. She vanished behind the corner. A second later, I heard quick footsteps moving toward the living room, followed by a laugh she was trying to hide. I called her strange, told her I loved her and left for work. At the time, it felt harmless. Lynn and I had been together for 6 years and married for almost 1. She was thoughtful, practical, and usually the person who pulled me back to reality when I let my imagination run too far. I liked horror movies, haunted house attractions, and podcasts about unexplained disappearances. Lynn tolerated those interests because she loved me, but she wanted no part of them herself. The one time I convinced her to watch The Shining, she lasted less than an hour. She hated being startled. She did not play pranks. She did not hide behind doors or jump out at people. Even when she laughed at something, she usually covered her mouth and tried to compose herself. That was why seeing her around the corner should have bothered me more than it did. Instead, I treated it as evidence that she was finally loosening up. 3 nights later, I woke shortly after 2 in the morning with a dry throat. Lynn was asleep beside me when I got out of bed. At least I thought she was. I went downstairs without turning on the hallway lights and opened the refrigerator. The kitchen was bright enough from the appliance bulb for me to find the orange juice. I stood at the island, drinking directly from the carton, when I felt that unmistakable sensation of being observed. I lowered the container. At first I saw nothing. Then I looked down. Lynn's face was inches above the floor on the opposite side of the island. Only her head and one shoulder were visible. She was staring up at me with her eyes opened as wide as she could force them. Her lips were pulled into a broad, silent grin. I shouted and dropped the carton. The plastic struck the tile and rolled, spilling orange juice beneath the cabinets. Lynn moved backward on her hands and feet. She did not stand. She scurried away on all fours, palms slapping the tile, bare heels scraping behind her. By the time I stepped around the island, she was gone. I stayed in the kitchen longer than I want to admit. When I finally returned upstairs, Lynn was lying on her side with the blanket pulled to her shoulder. Her breathing was slow and even. I stood beside the bed, watching her, trying to decide whether she was pretending. She never moved. The next morning, I brought it up over coffee. "What were you doing in the kitchen last night?" She looked genuinely confused. "When?" "You were on the floor behind the island." Her eyes shifted toward the kitchen. Then she looked back at me and started laughing. It was not the silent grin from the night before. It was her normal laugh, warm and breathless. The difference made me question my own memory. "You scared me half to death," I said. She put her arms around my neck. "You scare easily for someone who watches so many horror movies." That was all she said. I should have pushed harder. I should have asked why she had crawled away. I should have asked how she had returned upstairs without making a sound. Instead, I kissed her and went to work. After that, the peeking became a pattern. Sometimes, I would notice one of her eyes above the back of the couch. Other times, I would see part of her face between the curtains, even though there was no reason for her to be standing behind them. Once, while folding laundry, I caught her looking through the narrow opening between the bedroom door and the frame. Every time I confronted her, she disappeared from view. Sometimes she laughed. Sometimes she said nothing. The worst early incident involved an old wooden trunk that had belonged to her grandmother. It sat at the foot of our bed, filled with quilts and photo albums. I was reading one evening when I heard the hinges creak. The lid had lifted less than an inch. One of Lynn's eyes appeared in the gap. I lowered my book. The lid rose slightly higher, revealing part of her nose and the edge of her smile. I could not understand how she had fit inside without removing the blankets. "Lynn, what are you doing?" She did not answer. Her visible eye remained fixed on me. "Come out." The lid slowly lowered until her face disappeared. I crossed the room and lifted it. The trunk was empty except for the quilts. Lynn walked into the bedroom several minutes later carrying a glass of water. She asked why I had pulled everything out of the trunk. I stared at her, waiting for some sign that she was continuing the joke. There was none. For the next 2 weeks, nothing happened. My body gradually stopped reacting to every doorway and dark gap. I convinced myself the incidents had been a strange phase. Maybe Lynn had enjoyed unsettling me more than she expected. Maybe she had decided I had finally learned my lesson. One night while we watched television, I made a careless joke about it. "You finally quit spying on me." She kept her eyes on the screen. "Maybe you just stopped catching me." She said it lightly, almost affectionately. I laughed because I did not know what else to do. After that, I began checking. Whenever I entered a room, I glanced behind the door. I looked beneath the kitchen table before sitting down. I inspected the gap between the couch and the wall. If Lynn was upstairs and I was downstairs, I found reasons to call her name just to hear where her voice came from. She noticed. "You've been jumpy," she said one evening. "Have I?" She smiled at me. Not the huge smile. Not yet. Just a normal one. Then several weeks passed without another incident, and I stopped checking. That was when she appeared in the shower. Lynn had told me she was spending the evening with a friend. Around 9, I went upstairs, turned on the shower, and stood beneath the water long enough to let the heat loosen my shoulders. I had shampoo in my hair when I felt watched again. The bathroom door had been closed. The curtain was drawn. I wiped water from my eyes. Lynn's head was inside the shower. Her body remained outside the curtain, but her neck and face had pushed through the opening. Her dark hair clung to the plastic and hung in wet ropes beside her cheeks. Her mouth was open, not smiling exactly. The corners were stretched back, but her jaw hung too low, as though she had forgotten how people arranged their faces. Her eyes were red and wet. I stumbled against the wall. Lynn. She did not blink. Black streaks ran beneath her eyes, where her makeup had mixed with the water. I shouted her name again. Her head withdrew slowly through the curtain. I saw the distorted shape of her body on the other side. She moved backward toward the bathroom door without turning around. Then the door slammed hard enough to shake the mirror. I jumped out of the shower, locked the door, and grabbed a towel. For nearly an hour, I paced the bathroom. At first, I was angry. Anger felt easier than fear. I shouted through the door, demanding that she stop. I told her the joke was over. There was no response. The shower continued dripping behind me. Then I heard a low sound. It was too soft to identify, somewhere between a moan and a laugh. I pressed my ear to the door. Lynn. Silence. I backed away. The bathroom had a narrow linen closet beside the sink. Its folding door was closed. I remember looking at it several times, without understanding why it bothered me. I told myself she had left the room. The door slam had been her leaving. She was somewhere in the hallway waiting for me to come out. Eventually, I knelt and looked beneath the bathroom door. The upstairs hallway was empty. I could see the railing and the top of the staircase. Nothing moved. I waited several minutes before standing. My hand was on the lock when I heard the sound again. This time it came from behind me. The closet door was open less than 2 inches. Lynn's eye filled the gap. As I turned, the opening widened and more of her face appeared. Her hands were clasped tightly beneath her chin. Her shoulders trembled with excitement. She had been inside the bathroom with me the entire time. A rough, breathy noise came from her open mouth. I unlocked the bathroom door and ran. I did not stop to dress. I took my keys and phone from the living room table and left the front door open behind me. I heard Lynn laughing upstairs. It was high, broken laughter, interrupted by the same hiccuping sound she had made inside the closet. I drove to my brother Chris's house, wearing only boxers and a towel around my shoulders. The drive took 40 minutes. Lynn called 4 times. She sent message after message asking where I was, whether I was safe, and why I had left so suddenly. She never mentioned the shower. Chris and his wife, Rebecca, let me inside without asking too many questions. Chris gave me sweatpants and a shirt. I told them Lynn and I had fought. It was not the truth, but I could not bring myself to say that I had fled because my wife had been hiding inside a bathroom closet. I imagined Chris asking the obvious question. Why hadn't I opened it earlier? I tried sleeping on their couch. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lynn's eye in the narrow gap. Sometime before dawn, I finally drifted off. I woke with the sensation that someone was standing over me. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. For several seconds, I refused to move. Then I turned toward the window beside the couch. Lynn's face was pressed against the glass. Her nose and lips had flattened against it. Her mouth was open in the same stretched expression, and 2 strands of saliva ran down the outside of the pane. I sat up so quickly, the blanket fell to the floor. She did not move. I crossed the room and struck the glass with my palm. "Go home." Her eyes followed my hand. "Lynn, go home." Her smile widened. I heard Chris and Rebecca moving upstairs. Lynn's head twitched toward the sound. When I looked toward the staircase, Chris was coming down. I turned back. Lynn was gone. 2 wet trails remained on the window. Chris checked outside with me, but there were no footprints beneath the glass. The soil was soft from rain, yet there was only a shallow depression near the foundation, too small to be a shoe print. They thought I had dreamed it. I let them. The next day, I turned off my phone. When I switched it on again, there were dozens of messages from Lynn. They were short, which bothered me almost as much as their content. Lynn normally wrote paragraphs about minor things. Now every message looked like it had been typed by someone, copying the idea of concern. "Please answer." "I love you." "Come home." "I'm worried." None of them asked why I was afraid. Rebecca tried to talk to me during lunch. "She came by this morning," she said. I stopped chewing. "Who?" "Lynn. She asked if you were awake." Rebecca continued washing dishes, while I searched every doorway in the room. "Did you let her in?" "No." "She said not to wake you." She looked exhausted. Lynn had spoken normally. She had stood at the door like a concerned wife and convinced Rebecca there was nothing wrong. That changed something for me. Until then, part of me had believed Lynn had lost control of herself. But if she could choose when to appear normal, then at least some part of her understood what she was doing. I called her mother. Marion had never liked me. She was formal, cold, and always seemed irritated by the fact that other people required her attention. When I told her Lynn had been behaving strangely, she tried to end the conversation. I asked whether Lynn had ever experienced episodes, breakdowns, anything that might explain what was happening. Marion went silent. Not confused. Silent. I could hear her breathing. "Benjamin," she said finally, "you need professional help." "You mean Lynn needs help?" Another pause. "Contact professionals. Do not call me again." She hung up. I replayed the conversation until the wording stopped sounding accidental. She had not said to get Lynn help. She had said I needed it. Chris agreed to return to the house with me the following morning. His plan was to speak calmly to Lynn and convince her to see a doctor. I agreed because I still loved her. That is difficult to explain, even now. Fear did not erase 6 years. I could still remember her sleeping with her hand on my shoulder, bringing me medicine when I was sick, crying during our wedding vows. I wanted the woman in those memories to be trapped somewhere inside, whatever was watching me. Her car was gone when we arrived. The front door stood partly open. The house was dark despite the morning sun. Every curtain had been drawn. A smell like spoiled meat drifted from upstairs. Chris stopped joking. We searched the first floor together. I checked behind the couch. Chris watched me do it. Ben, she's an adult woman. I know. Then why are you looking under furniture? I did not answer. Broken glass covered several steps. Our wedding photograph hung crooked on the wall, its frame empty of glass. A jagged section had been removed from one corner. Upstairs, the bathroom looked exactly as I had left it. The shower curtain was partly open. The linen closet was empty. I went into the bedroom to collect clothes while Chris waited near the stairs. The smell grew stronger when I opened the bedroom closet. At first, I could not understand what I was seeing. Small wet objects had been arranged on the carpet in pairs. Eyes. Some came from birds. Others were larger. Cats, rabbits, maybe raccoons. At least a dozen pairs had been placed in careful rows, each one positioned as though looking outward from the darkness. Chris stepped beside me and gagged. We're leaving. I closed the closet door. Neither of us made another joke. As I lifted my bag, that familiar awareness returned. Someone was watching. I turned slowly toward the bed. Lynn lay beneath it on her side. Her hands were folded beneath her chin. Her eyes were wide, and her body shook with barely contained excitement. A small choking sound escaped her throat. Chris whispered my name. I should have backed away. Instead, I crouched. Lynn. Her head made two quick nodding motions. I want to help you. Her fingers moved against one another. They were coated in blood. I looked at the rows of eyes in the closet and understood where at least some of the blood had come from. I love you, I said. Her shoulders shook harder. I reached toward her hand. The glass struck my forearm before I saw it. Pain flashed from my wrist to my elbow. I fell backward, pressing my other hand over the cut. Lynn crawled out from beneath the bed, holding a triangular piece of glass. Her smile disappeared when she saw Chris. Her lips pulled back. Her eyes narrowed. Chris stood at the top of the stairs, frozen. Move, I told him. Lynn rose inside the bedroom doorway. Blood dripped from the glass onto the carpet. Chris took one step down. Lynn jerked her head toward him. Then she smiled again. Not because she was looking at me. Because she had realized there were two of us to watch. She ran. Chris stumbled down the stairs. I followed, skipping steps, while Lynn struck the wall behind me with the glass. At the bottom, Chris reached the front door first. I was almost there when Lynn landed on my back. Her arm wrapped around my throat. Her face pressed beside my ear, and I heard the wet clicking sound inside her open mouth. I threw myself backward against the wall. She lost her grip. The glass cut across my shoulder as she fell. I reached the front door and dragged it open. Chris was already outside calling 911. I ran toward the car. Lynn did not follow. Through the open doorway, I saw her crouching in the hall. Only one side of her face was visible around the frame. Just like the first morning, the police searched the house and surrounding area. They found the animal remains. They found my blood and Lynn's fingerprints on the glass. They found evidence that someone had been sleeping in the attic crawl space above the bedroom. They did not find Lynn. I received 11 stitches in my arm and 3 across my shoulder. An officer advised me to stay somewhere she would not expect and to file for a protective order. He said it as though paperwork could stop someone who could remain inside a trunk without disturbing the blankets. I checked into a motel an hour away. For 4 hours, nothing happened. Then my phone received a message from an unknown number. 3 words. I found you. A photograph was attached. The image was dark and grainy, taken from somewhere near the motel room floor. The bed occupied most of the frame. My shoes were visible beside it. In the lower corner, partly hidden behind the room's small desk, was one wide, unblinking eye. At first I thought the photograph showed Lynn hiding inside my room. Then I noticed the angle. The picture had been taken before I entered. She had not followed me to the motel. She had been waiting there. And by the time I understood that, the space beneath the desk was already empty.